last episode we celebrated Pokemon Day, and it was a great day. It was a great episode too. And today we're actually celebrating 8 years of the Nintendo Switch being out. Can you believe that?
Is that true?
It really is, yeah. So it doesn't feel like it's crazy, but with that comes 8 years of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which was just such a game changer, literally, for the series. Super Mario Odyssey, these are the games that came out on release for the Nintendo Switch, and it was phenomenal, right? It made such a big impact in my life and my gaming career and all that, and it was just so cool. So we're celebrating that, and it's very good to acknowledge it. But I don't want to make this whole episode about me. So Jake, what are we talking about today?
The perfect segue. So one of us competed last year, but that's old news. The other one of us here is trying to do some domain expansion, you might say. Aha!
Wearing it.
People watching the video will get the reference.
The back has the enemies too.
There you go. Yeah, so we got another one going down the rabbit hole here, right? Kind of getting ready and starting to do some of the pre-planning and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we want to dive in here today. Get a good idea of what Mr. Colby, PhD, is doing to get himself in position to have a successful bodybuilding contest prep. Yes, with graduate Pikachu there.
It's only real if I have the Pikachu, in the actual cap and gown. That's when I solidified that, okay, I actually did it. So when I walked the stage, I have the little piece of paper, but that didn't matter. But the plushie, that makes it legit. So yeah, I guess I do have to talk about myself this episode.
A little bit.
A little bit. But yeah, I think it's, I briefly had mentioned in the last episode, and you seemed excited about it. And I was like, oh yeah, we could definitely talk more about it. And I think it'll be beneficial to the listeners as well to kind of get the behind the scenes of what that looks like, especially because it is still pretty far out. And even, before that, giving some insight of to what I was thinking 1 year in advance, years ago, and just kind of how the inception of I want to compete kind of started. I think we'll talk pretty briefly about the earlier days of that, and specifically talk more about, the more immediate time frame of that 1 year, and then now specifically that pre-prep. But I think it's important to talk about the context leading up to it, because it builds off of one another, right? And there's some valuable stuff there too. So I think, yeah, interesting enough, I've talked about it before. I've always wanted to compete in some regard. I just really liked bodybuilding. I always liked lifting in general, but starting off in powerlifting, that took priority, and then I missed bodybuilding, so I came back to that. And what really struck the competition chord was my first semester at FAU, when Eric Helms was there doing his data collection. When he was around, everyone in the lab was just more motivated to train because he was there, right? It was cool to see him doing his thing in regards to training and science. And it was just, he made such an impact on us in many ways. And that was training specifically. And we very much realized that, especially when he left, right? Because when he left, we're like, man, we miss him. Don't tell him. But we missed him. And he was, it's not the same. So semi-jokingly, we're like, all right, you know what? I remember writing on the whiteboard, is okay, Helms versus Souza versus Belcher versus Carzoli versus, just putting everyone's names, I think 2022 bodybuilding competition. All right, this is what we're working towards. We're going to actually all step on stage and compete against Helms. And like for a while, we're like, yeah, this is cool. So you'd walk in, you see that and be like, it's happening. And then, time went on, a couple months, a year, and people were like, oh yeah, that was a fun idea. But in my head, I'm like, I'm pretty serious about that. I would love to step on stage, especially against Helms or with Helms, however you want to phrase it. It's just like, man, that would be such a cool thing to do. So it always was something I wanted to take part in. And I think obviously super early on, like that was what, oh God, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, like that small inception. I didn't even have enough time spending actually building muscle or training to say, okay, I'm ready to compete. And that's kind of where I want to spend some time there is, you have to respect the stage, right? And I think this also is going to vary from person to person. But I think in some way, just importantly, a good way to look at it is the stage will always be there, right? You don't want to rush getting on the stage, meaning, you don't have to compete just to say you're a bodybuilder, or you don't have to compete to look a certain way, feel a certain way, whatever it might be. I think very much you can love bodybuilding and technically never compete, right? You just love the idea of building muscle and growing your physique and going through those journeys. That's a huge part of it. But obviously competing can be a part of it, and it's something that I've always wanted to do, like I said. So I first wanted to make sure that I guess earned it, you could say, because it's tough. And it's, I mean, you know this, Jake, you just went through it. It's not easy. It's a lot of people will be like, well, why are you doing that? It's not technically fun. You're just starving yourself, right? So you're missing out on doing all those things. So it's something that I wanted to make sure, one, I earned, two, I was as ready as I could be for, right? And I think being, just at that point, just into the master's, going into PhD, I didn't want to do a prep during PhD. I'm not Jake. I'm not Superman. I can't do it. I've had Jake.
I did it because it's easier, paradoxically.
Yeah. So and in my mind,
actually,
yeah, and you crushed it. So that was huge props to you again for that. That was really cool. I think in my head, a little differently, I thought it could be done, but didn't want to miss out on opportunities that could have arisen during PhD, especially because I was in a whole new country and I have all these opportunities, things that I technically wouldn't be able to do again, specifically either like, helping out with other studies, being with friends, being able to go out to the beach, doing all these things, right? Just having that experience. So for me personally, not saying there's right or wrong here, I just feel like it wasn't the right time. So I wanted to, again, wait until I feel like it was ready. But then that's also a tough spot to be in itself, because in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm never going to be ready because I'll never have enough muscle. I will never feel like I can do this. And it's like, I could always technically be better next year. So why not push it back? So there was a little bit of that, more so as we got closer to today's date. But I think first off, spending time, that's the inception of it. That's how I want to do it. It helped with getting some direction in training, especially just kind of maximizing what hypertrophy is. And that was really cool because I was still, I was in the middle of my PhD where I was just learning so much about training in general too. So I was able to put a lot of stuff that I was learning into practice. So that was a fun time to do so. And it kind of, in my eyes, solidified, take some more time to really, get this hypertrophy thing down first and give some dedicated time bodybuilding and being in gaining phases before you have to do some dieting, right? And I think I might have taken that a little bit too far in one direction. I'm like, okay, I don't need to diet down technically. And I'm at the time I started, I was probably around 85 kilos. I'm using kilos because I'm just so used to it, because not only just being in New Zealand, but even before that, just when you're using science, you're going to use kilos and stuff more often. So I apologize in advance if people are like, what's the pound? Something 188.
We're in America, Colby. In America.
I'm sorry. But yeah, so like when I was, this is probably 2018 now, we're starting off. It's okay, I'm not going to compete technically in the next 3 years. Ideally, once I finish PhD, then I can compete. So at the time, that was like 2022, right? And before all the COVID stuff happened. So that changed everything, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But yeah, it was like, okay, I don't need to diet down. I'm still pretty new, I would say, in terms of being a bodybuilder and being in these dedicated gaining phases and muscle specific training, right? And bodybuilding specific training rather. So I wanted to quote unquote maximize that as best as possible, meaning not dieting. So I spent time just eating and really training hard and focusing on recovery and not worrying much about the scale weight. And that was good, primarily good in a lot of ways. It was quote unquote maybe bad just because I got to points where I was just really heavy, but I think that was okay. And I think what I learned from that, and I talked about this briefly in last episode when we talked about mental health, was just being comfortable with that idea of being heavier and loving yourself at multiple weights and not having that attachment to the scale, especially if, hey, I'm going to be competing at some point where the data matters a little bit more and you should be taking some more numbers, where that's going to be more at the forefront of my mind. I want to stay away from that for a little time so that, I have these phases where it's like you're weighing yourself more frequently here, you're not weighing yourself more frequently here, right? Just so it's not always on in terms of collect data, right? And I think it's important to have those phases too. So spent a lot of time, I said this before too, got upwards. I spent most of my time on average around like 92 kilos, I would say, around the average. And that fluctuated between like 88 and 100. So I get to close to 100, but I think I need to diet down a little bit because I feel a little bit too heavy here, and I don't want to continue to be heavier because again, at some point I am going to need to diet down. So be prepared for that, so I don't have to do a super mega massive dieting phase, right? So I would diet back down to, sometimes it was 95, sometimes it was 90, get up to 95, down to 88, whatever you want to be. There was just some fluctuations, but with the large bulk of the year being not dieting. And that includes some maintenance phases too, right? I think sometimes people forget that it doesn't have to be just dieting, just gaining. Maintenance phases can be extremely valuable in that sense too. So yeah, I think that was a lot of the pre-prep stuff, even like thinking about competing stuff, just spending time really loving the training, building on some muscle, so that, again, we talk about bodybuilding being you versus you, and I think that's very much a part of it. But I think there's also some room on that spectrum of where you want to be competitive. Again, something we talked about last episode a bit more. And for me, in my mind, it was like a 95-5, where it's 95%, yes, it's very much me, but 5%, like, man, I want to look good. I want to be competitive in some regard on the stage. Like when I show up, again, it's mainly for me. I want to feel like I belong on the stage, and meaning I'm somewhat, holding my own against these other bodybuilders, right? So I think that was part of it for me. Again, more so my journey and all that, but some competitiveness very much so in that sense. So yeah, I've been talking for a lot. Anything comes up there you want to touch upon? Questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. First of all, I very much relate to that last point that you made, and I think it's super important to emphasize that that's okay. Like we all, right, and everybody rightfully so talks about how it needs to be for you, and it needs to be for reasons beyond just placing and the exact way that you look and things like that. Just because some of it's outside your control, and so on and so forth. And you're probably never going to feel like you're finally big enough to do it, or like you're always going to have a reason of, oh, I want my legs to be bigger, or oh, I want my arms to be bigger first, whatever. Eventually, you just got to do it if you actually want to do it. But I think it's okay to also have that part of you that like wants that competitive side of it, right? That wants, because a prep is a big ordeal, right? Like this is a long timeline we're talking about for years, and mine was similar, that you're going through this long process where you're not building much, if any, muscle, and then you might actually lose a little bit towards the end. And then psychologically, it's, you're going through the ringer sort of, right? And there's this recovery phase and all this stuff. Your hormones take a big hit. They're not optimal for muscle building, even when you start regaining weight. It's, there's a bunch going on. You're making a really big investment, and you want that time to be worth it, right? You don't want to, go through this huge diet just to get on stage and be like, man, I'm just kind of disappointed with how I look. That sucks, So like, it's okay. It's okay to do that. I think some of that is some mental reframing of, changing what your goals are and so on and so forth. But it's okay to still feel competitive, right? We don't want to squash that either. So I relate to that strongly, and I think that's fine. And I think the second thing, just a question, is when we have this long, we're talking years of, I want to compete. Let me do some bodybuilding specific training. Let me focus on, going through these phases, weight gain, weight loss, etc., to kind of get into a position where I feel like, okay, now I feel like I have a level of muscle mass and a level of leanness and whatever that I feel good about to start. I think a lot of people say those words and have those goals and have the best of intentions, but it's so hard to fall off track and to just kind of just wind up not competing. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Just to be clear. But for you set that very long-term goal, and now you're here, right? You're following through, right? So I guess as a question of, is there anything that comes to mind in terms of beyond, and maybe it's as simple as like, you just really want to do it, and that's fine if it's that simple, right? But is there anything that you think was kind of your anchor and your rock for still coming back, still following through, even, these however many years later it's been?
I talked a lot of trash to Helms, telling him that I would beat him on stage, even though I knew I wouldn't. It was just kind of fun to do so I kind of have to. And I told a lot of people about it, so
Fair.
yeah. Joking, but that was kind of did that. I think, yeah, it's it's. I think the main thing being, when I first set off the idea of I want to compete, I really took time to sit on that thought before saying it out loud. Like, okay, what does that mean? Why do I want to compete? What does that mean for me? What do I feel like I will gain from it? What do I feel like I will learn? What are the risks, rewards? I sat on the thought a lot before making it vocal. And I think that was very helpful, because I is this that why? It's like, okay, I want to compete because I want to really challenge myself. I want to see what I'm made of. I want to see where I can grow, not only just, in muscle mass, but also in terms of my mindset, in terms of my work ethic, in terms of all these things that the bodybuilding journey can come with, right? It's something that not a lot of people do. And it is an extreme way. But again, as we know, I like jumping on those deep ends. So I think I can learn a lot in that sense and really come out of the bodybuilding journey of competing specifically with a lot learned. And that, to me, because knowledge and learning and continually growing is those are all values of mine. I think this was an avenue that provided that in many ways, right? And even more so, just if I go through this phase, I would then have the experience to do so, so that I can help other people do it. That's also very much a big value of mine, is being able to help people as much as I can in the best way I can. And to do that specifically for bodybuilding, I think that comes with walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Because yes, I think right now I have practically something that I have knowledge and I understand what it takes, but I haven't gone through it. I myself am probably going to go through this and be like, damn, yeah, I knew this was going to happen, but I didn't know it was going to feel like this,
Yes.
or I didn't think this was going to happen, or life threw a curveball at me, and now I'm like, damn, this happens sometimes. How do I myself navigate it? I know what I might say to someone else, and I probably will tell myself that as I go through it, or Helms will tell me how to navigate it. But actually doing the action is different, and I really want to go through that so that I have that, so I can relate to people better, so I can, all these things. So it's before even vocalizing it, even if it's years in advance, it's just knowing what that means. Because I think I like to, kind of like you said, I like to, if I say something and if I mean something, I want to mean it. I want to fall through with that, right? If I make a statement, if I make a promise, I want to make sure that it's as achievable and doable as possible. And I hold to that because that's important to me as well. So yeah, I think those were all things that were helpful in navigating this super long journey. And then of course, like in practice, just keeping that in the back of my mind, but also just knowing like it's far away. So what's some more short-term stuff that can keep me going with that North Star in mind? And that's where, like we always talk about, just loving the training, right? And especially in these phases where I was super far away and just focusing on putting on size, putting on just weight in general, which came with body fat, which seems counterintuitive to the end goal. Just saying like, no, this is part of that process, because you're going to gain a little bit of fat. That's okay. That's expected. I'm going to control that as best as I can. And like I said, maybe I went a little bit too far with that, but I still came out of it with so much knowledge, because now again, I know how it feels to be heavier than maybe I want to be. So when I'm telling someone, I know what that feels like, I know what that feels like, right? Yeah. And I can say, this is how I would go through it. This is how I went through it, for giving an example, but also like, again, relatedness comes into play there. So all these things were just so much learning it comes through this, and that's the coolest part, and that's why I love it. It's just we're always learning in that sense. So yeah, those are big things for keeping that goal, and navigating it and going through the practice of it. So
Yeah.
other questions in that like regard, or is that answer your questions, kind sir?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the prologue, right?
Yeah.
The stage is set. We see the backstory, and now that was season 1 of Vinland Saga, right? So now we get into season 2, and the actual story starts.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Bro, you gotta watch Vinland Saga.
I know my brother keeps telling me, especially, it's like, because it sounds like something I would very much like. So I just don't know if I want to read it or watch it. That's the thing, because I'm reading Berserk and I'm like, okay, I don't think I can do both at the same time, because they're too good. I can't. That's just too much. Goodness,
I want to get. They're making some really nice deluxe editions of the manga.
Yes, that's
pretty badly.
Yeah. So
anyway,
yeah. Damn it! I thought we were gonna talk more about anime, but yeah.
As we get into closer to present day here, you have sort of in a more direct, acute sense, have recently gone through this process of like, okay, let me position myself to not just to prep in the future, but to prep this year, right? So it's been much more immediate, the action in the process. So it might be interesting for people to hear sort of exactly what you did, and you can throw some numbers on there too if you want to, and just sort of how we've kind of gotten this, diet before the diet, as Alberto Nunez has said, and just kind of getting yourself into that position where now you basically do phase 1, and then you can kind of recover a bit and then get into the next phase. But let's not get let me not get ahead of us here. So
Stealing my thunder, man. I don't know what to talk about anymore.
Let's
But
thanks for listening. Podcast is done. That's all
bye.
you
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I'm gonna see. So I heard you like diets before the diet. So I'm gonna do the diet before the diet before the diet, and that's where I'm gonna start. There is so like I said, at some point I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have to lose quite a bit of weight, especially if I'm hovering around heavier weights, like around that 90 on average. I'm gonna have to get to a better position before I even do a smaller pre-positioning, because it's like I don't want to be 2 years technically dieting, because if I go faster, I'm going to risk losing muscle mass, or it's just going to feel a lot harder than it needs to, and it's going to be miserable. And then to say, hey, you're also going to do another 20 plus week prep, it's like, how feasible is
intimidating.
that? Yeah,
there's so much time.
Yeah, exactly. So when things started again to feel a little bit more real, and this is pretty much related to PhD finishing up, right? So in basically in the beginning of 2024, where I was getting ready to submit. So I'm like, okay, like I see the light at the end of the tunnel for that. I can start looking at other things I could do, which is this prep thing. So it's like, okay, I needed that in my mind. I need that prerequisite of PhD done to then go to this next phase, so that I wouldn't have to worry about it, because I didn't want to compromise that in any way. So beginning of 2024, I was like, okay, and to preface too, I was home for roughly a year at this point now too, because I obviously finished my stuff at data collection in New Zealand, came back home for family stuff, and then just finished up my writing, and then from there submitted and all that. So being home for about a year, and at that point I was just I had finished up a diet before I went home. I was around 88.5 kilos coming home, and then from there, within that year, I got up to I have it here. I got up to 93 within a year, because I was like, okay, I'm home. Here's some food I didn't have for a while. I was dieting for quite a bit before. I don't want to worry about it. And now I'm just going to finish PhD, train, figure some stuff out, and go from there.
Yeah, kind of relax a little bit too. I think that's important. You said that earlier. That's super important to have those periods where you're more relaxed, I think.
I was definitely not good at relaxing, because I've always been, so much to do, PhD work, this is that. So it was very hard to get into that. So I'm glad I gave myself that grace period. And to be completely honest, I'm probably still going through that, because it's hard to figure life stuff out. Because you're just like, what's going on? And that's okay though, right? I think that's fine. I'm trying. That's something I'm actively trying to work on, just being kinder to myself in that way. I'm like, dude, I don't have to have it all figured out. Like, I need some direction. I need to be taking action, which I am, but I don't have to have it all figured out. No one does, importantly, right? So yeah, I think started 2024. I was like, let me go through a diet, so because I know it's going to happen at some point, so let me be in a good position. So I started dieting, and this was the first time I dieted while at home in this environment in, like I said, maybe 5-6 years, because I was at a master's and then doing PhD, so I just wasn't around at home much. And it was extremely different. It wasn't the same as when I was doing dieting phases back in New Zealand, because like I mentioned in previous episodes, like I was in a house of other lifting enthusiasts where we just all, we just make good stuff all the time, and we're pretty conscious about getting our micros and getting our macros in. You can be super active in New Zealand. It's very nice out. I was walking to and from school. Like my average was 20K steps per day, just by normally doing stuff, because I was walking 45 minutes to school, 45 minutes back, and all that. So it was easy for me to get steps in, and like not having to monitor weight too much was easy at that end phase of PhD at New Zealand. So when I came home, completely different. Here's access to all this food that doesn't even exist really in New Zealand. And then being at home, living with my parents still, it's like, they just have a lot more available, because they're not bodybuilders. They don't really, they're not as conscious of that. And it's just that, combined with it being very cold, especially in the wintertime, I'm not walking as much. It's not that great to walk in the States either, because it's not so walkable. So I had to drive more places. Activity down, eating a lot more. Like that's the recipe for, okay, it's tougher to do stuff, right? There really is. So that first bigger dieting phase went very poorly. It really did in regards to like specific numbers. Like I have it here. I started in the beginning, and it took me, I started at 93 in the sense, and it took me, I went for 22 weeks, and I only got down to 87. So 6 kilos, roughly 14 pounds, something like that, 2.204, do that math, around there, right? That's, if we're looking at recommendations, that's not where we should be. It's a lot less. And I think, again, so you can look at that and make that's a failure. But I I learned so much about like, navigating my new environment, navigating just new stuff in general. And I think that was very important to do so. And that's why, again, it's so important to give yourself way more time than you think you need in any phases, but even more so in this case, because I didn't expect that. If I had done that longer, that first dieting phase, like closer to now, I'd be so scared because like I don't have enough time. There's no
Right.
way. Like I would be also very nervous during that phase because I'd be like, I failed. There's no way I can get ready for a prep now. It took 22 weeks. It took me to lose 6 kilos. I'd have to lose another 15, 20. Like that's not possible. This is not
Right.
possible. Or if it is, at what cost? A cost I'm not willing to give. Right. So that's why I think again it's super important to give way more time than you think. And again, I knew that, which is why it was helpful in that sense that I had this longer term vision and this understanding of what that looked like and what that takes. So that first phase, not successful. Learned a ton though, like I said. And then from there, I took like an 8-week break because I was doing a little bit of traveling and I just didn't want to be dieting. Because again, I was getting to that point where it's like, I don't want to drop calories because I just know like my calories are already low as it is. I don't feel like it's feasible. I started to really get in my head a little bit too much because I'm like, I should be somewhere else in terms of my weight. Like I should be here. I should have lost more. So I'm like, I don't want to go deeper down this. There's no need to. Fill up that tank and come back at it with this whole new perspective, with whole new energy, with whole new knowledge, whole new skill set that I learned, and go from there.
Yeah.
So took that 8-week break, came into it, this next dieting phase, and this was helpful because life stuff was a lot easier because I officially had submitted and done. So I think that played a role in it as well because I was still kind of stressed out there. So next dieting phase, it went really well. I have it here. It took me 11 weeks to lose 6 kg. So half the time to lose the same amount of weight.
Mm-hmm.
It was much easier. It didn't feel like I was dieting. It just was easy because okay, I know what things need to look like. I know what to be aware of. Like certain foods that would make me want to eat more, certain events to be aware of, being better at saying no to eating food out or getting food out. And hey, it's cold out. I can walk around my house up and down the hallway if I need to. I could just stay more time at the gym and walk around during my sets. Other skills and things to that I wouldn't have known if I didn't go through that first phase and quote unquote failed. That came into this next phase and just really, I did really damn well with it, and I'm proud of that. And I think that's important to acknowledge. And dude, it was just easy. 11 weeks, 6 kg. I felt like it was a much better position. So from there, this is where I went from 88.5 to 82.5. So I'm okay. This is a decent spot to be. And when looking at what weights to be at, it's tough to always know because everybody's going to be different. So what I did in my mind was just looked at people who are around my height who competed and what's the average weight that people have on like a stage weight for that, right? So I'm looking at other people around 5'8". What's that looking like? Ends up being around between like 68 to 72 kilograms, depending on muscle mass, depending on distribution, all that. So of course, for the memes, I'm like, we're going to 69 kg. That's my stage weight, and it's just easy to go towards. I got the thumbs up from Jake right there, so I knew that was the weight to be at.
Some people might say.
Right? And technically, like, hey, the data is pointing to that. So I just needed something to work with. Whether or not that's accurate, it's within a good ballpark, right? Because it's like, okay, let me get to some idea. Because then from there, sometimes you see the number thrown around of like be 10 to 12% away from stage weight to start your prep, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, for that, if it's going up to 69, that's around 77, 78. And that's given like maybe like a 20 to 24 week prep. So I was like, I'm going to get as close to that as possible. I didn't get there, as you saw. I got to like 82, and I was like, okay, I don't want to go through another phase of dieting because this is the point now where I'm going back to New Zealand to fully graduate, and I'm going to be eating some Korean fried chicken at my favorite chicken spot. I'm going to be going out celebrating, right? So the things, it's like, okay, give myself a little buffer again, and then see where we're at. So almost done with this part, and then we can question in here.
Yeah.
And then, so it's like from 82.5, took another 8 weeks off. And with holidays plus travel, I went up 2 kg. So not terrible. I think that was pretty good. And I felt good about that because in previous times, I was very bad at being in quote unquote maintenance phases or just not going too far off. So I was really good that it was just 2 kg. And a lot of that was probably just food volume and water retention. Right. Sure. So that was fine with me. So at 84.5, starting into the new year, I'm like, okay, this is the year. I'm going to be competing at the end of the year. I said I should get around 78, 77. I'm not there. I want to do a pre-prep. I want to make sure I get to a better position rather than going through a longer phase there. So this is where that pre-prep stage started, where I said, okay, I'm going to take 5 weeks lose as much as I can within means, like not going too crazy. And then from there, refuel for another 6 weeks and then get into prep. And that's where we're at now. So
yeah,
what
beautiful.
do you got for me?
I think I want to highlight how well this was executed, right? Because nothing's ever going to be absolutely perfect in terms of I want to be this weight at this week and then that weight at that week, and I'm going to lose exactly this many pounds or kilos. Like it those plans are great and it gives you a structure and in a direction. But like, I'm glad that you're like, oh, I'm whatever 3 kilos off or whatever it is from the number, and like, oh, that's a failure. Like, it's not that at all, right? There's wiggle room with everything. But I think the bigger picture, the good thing, the point is you had a plan that is not only built around the evidence that we have, meaning, some research, but also just practice. This stuff is really hard to research, right? So we got to lean on coaching anecdotes and whatever. But it's based on that stuff, but it's also based around your life and some of the events that were coming up. And like, you wanted to make sure that you had those breaks in there just psychologically so you could, recharge, which I think is the perfect word for it. But then also having one of those breaks around, graduation, and, because you're going to be celebrated. And that, I think that's such a great lesson for people listening to. It doesn't have to be a prep. It can be any diet, right? But if you have these big events that you're really going to feel like you missed out on something meaningful, if and it's not, there's other ways to celebrate than just food, but let's be honest, food is a fun way to celebrate. A lot of us enjoy that. So if you feel like you're going to miss out, like, okay, well, let's just plan a diet break there or a maintenance phase or whatever, right? So I love that you did that. And I think that it has really paid off to the point that you've been able to gradually shed off some of the extra weight and get to this position where the timeline and the amount of weight loss makes a lot of sense. And you're not just completely burnt out psychologically at the start. Like, you've had these breaks to come up for air, and you got to as full of a gas tank as you can realistically ask for, and ready to jump in. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if I really have any questions other than just, I think that your approach is well worth highlighting, and for people to really take away and apply to any of their circumstances, even outside of a prep diet, just any diet. Think about, there's always there's never a perfect time to do it, whatever, which I think is true, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan ahead a little bit and think about, where do things line up? Should I really be dieting during that time? Is it really a big deal? If not, cool, do your thing. If so, plan around it and give yourself that extra space. So yeah, I don't know. Well done. Yeah. That's what I got. Well done.
Shucks, thanks. So yeah, so when I went back at the end of last year to graduate, I was able to talk more with Helms about it, and he's been super helpful just knowing that he's in my corner, right? Because like before it was like, hey, I always pitch him the ideas of this is what I want to do, and then he's like, when the time comes, if you want more direction, I'd be glad to help. So that's when it came to New Zealand. I was like, it's time, coach, and he's like, let's do it. So thankfully, having Eric in my corner is going to be phenomenal for many reasons, because all the benefits that we talk about having a coach, right? But I think especially because he knows me very well, right? Especially working with him for PhD, he knows a lot of how I operate. He knows especially where I need a push or I need to say, hey, dude, you're just overthinking, Colby. Like, trust me. And I trust him completely in that sense, right? And not only just because he's knowledgeable in this, it's just because he's a good human. It's because he knows me. It's just his actions that he shows, right? So I think that makes this process a lot easier. It's very much going to be a collaborative one, because I think up until this point, I've never had a coach. I like having myself as a coach because I like experimenting. I like, having the reins in some sense, but especially now going through a prep where I have experience with, I would very much need that help and want that help. So I think that's important too. And even though, like I said, theoretically, I probably could go through it, it's just going to be more stress on an already stressful situation. So I would rather not. Right. So I think that's important to acknowledge too, is like, hey, it's okay to reach out for the help in regards to that. So it's going to be cool. And when I say it's a collaborative process, it's going to be, he's always going to have the end say, right? But I think a lot of times, again, because I want to learn as much as possible, and we've had this discussion where I'm like, hey, I just want to learn how this stuff works. So it's like certain times he'll give me almost like pop quizzes. Okay, like leading up to when I had went to New Zealand, he's like, get down to around low 80s and we'll start from there. So I was like, boom, easy. That's all I need to know. I can do that. I can execute, right? Especially going through that last successful dieting phase. I'm like, that's going to be pretty easy for me. So did that, boom, check mark, felt good. Coming into this year, like I said, start off around the 84 and a half, and we had talked about it. And this is where I expressed more of my opinion, where like, I'd rather lose a little bit more and be in a better position than having to do like an extra 4 weeks of the prep. Because I was like, especially starting the new year, and it's like I do well with the dieting. I rather, like I said, 5-6 week. Let me get into it, take a small break, and then go into the prep. So that's what I did. I went from 84 and a half to 81 and a half across 5 weeks. Again, a little bit faster, but still within like the 1%, because when we look at recommendations, we pretty much go 0.5 to 1% loss per week, right? So I'm at the higher end of the 1% in this small phase, but because at the beginning you're just gonna lose a little bit more because of the water and food volume in your gut. So that was fine. Like I felt completely fine. And again, because I am heavier, I'm not super lean, I can get away with it. And knowing lastly that it's going to be a short term, like if I had to suffer, I could quote unquote suffer for this very small amount of period of time. Didn't suffer though. I think it went really well. Again, because especially this was like the last test. Like, okay, bad 22-week diet, quote unquote bad. Very successful 11-week diet. Mini 5-week get in, get out. And it's like check, 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 earn those boxes. Now I'm at the spot where got to 81 and a half, like I said, feeling really good. Got the okay. I'm like, yes, like where we're at in terms of body fat based on pictures and posing, looks like we're in a good position that we can go into the prep starting in April. So now I'm chilling and maintenance, which is fun because I got some food in me, which is good. And I think, again, because like I talked before, another chance to get better at being at maintenance calories and seeing what that looks like, and especially at this lower weight. So like it's been a week and a half and I mean, it's pretty much the exact same weight. At the start went up a little bit, but it came back down. So it's like, yeah, that looks really good. And what we basically did was we're doing like more of a reverse kind of style where so I had 5 low days, 2 high days, basically brought up the low days, 300 calories, kept the 2 high days, and just dropped my activity a little bit. So that kind of all evens out. So then and then I'm gonna check in a couple of days and see how that goes. And if maybe I'll increase the last low days to all maintenance days, probably gonna happen, ride it out for another 3 weeks, then start prep. So it's like, there's a lot that goes into it in that sense, and in the thinking side of things and the execution. But so that's why when you give yourself so much time, you're ready for it. Like I said, we're ready for those hiccups, we're ready for the life throws and all that. So I think that's kind of where we're at now. And the goal is in terms of shows and competing. So last week when we had our call a week and a half ago, I picked basically 4 or 5 shows. I might do 2 or 3. I'll probably only do 2 or 3. I don't really want to do 4 or 5. If it lines up and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Good. But I want to, 1, get that first show in to get the nerves out because I kind of need that, right? 2, I want to make them feasible. I want to make sure I'm getting pretty ready for them. So if I have to cut like the earliest one and just do the 2 or 3 later ones, that's okay. Just giving again myself room for wiggling in that sense.
Sure.
So
Definitely
I think
do more than one though.
yeah, because I'm not gonna after this 2, 3, 4 years of gaining and not competing again. So like I want to get the practice in, get the exposure, get all the experience. So like that's where I was like 2, 3, probably closer to 3 because luckily there's some good shows around me that are pretty easy to access. Like they're all within 2 hours drive. I'm like, perfect.
Nice.
I can make it happen. Beautiful. Yeah. So I was like, I said they're different variations like OCB, WMBF, all that. But like first season doesn't matter too much. Like I'm not gonna really compete at Worlds. I don't think. Right? That'd be cool. Not going in there with the expectation, right? But it's like first season, just do it. Literally just
100%. Yeah, I think that was my same thought. Also, the only reason that I wound up only doing 2 instead of 3 was just financially. Yeah, it gets up there, So that's it's a consideration for sure. But at the end of the day, I do think doing more than one is good. Just be like you went through that whole process, man. Like get your time's worth. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm glad it's a great plan. I like it a lot.
Thanks. And I think it is very much a plan. It can very much change, and that's okay. And I think it kind of already slightly changed, where it's like, okay, let me do this small, like even more so smaller, aggressive pre-prep before the other one, just to be sure. Like that wasn't necessarily planned, but because I didn't get as low as maybe I wanted to or needed to, and I spent time eating food up and going to graduation, it made sense to do that, and I was okay with that. I think, especially now in the forefront, looking back, totally fine, well worth it. And now I'm basically, so like I said, for the earlier show, this is considering because I wrote it down for a week and a half ago, it'll be, I have here 33, 36, 39, and 30, 33, 36, 37, 39 weeks out. So again, still a whole pretty long time, but
Yeah. Do you have a
enough.
date? Sorry,
The
I
actual
mean,
dates, yeah. So
just
the
like the earliest one or
the
something.
earliest would be October 11th and
Oh, okay,
12th.
cool.
Yeah, and then so that one's maybe like the most definite first one would be November 1st because it's like, yeah, I'll definitely do that one. And then maybe the one after that, then November 8th, and then after November 22nd, like very much so. So like that's my anticipation. So it's
Same
like,
time of year I did. That's fun.
yeah, yeah, it just lines up nicely, right, in terms of like
Be done before
timing,
Christmas.
weather, yeah, all that. So it's like, okay, we can make that happen. And it just what was around, which was cool too. So yeah, like having the weeks out is helpful. But I think one of the things I'm really trying to do is use that to be in a good position, but not use that as like a countdown to like, oh damn, like I can't wait 28 weeks and it's just over. I'm trying to be extremely present in just here during it all because it's probably going to go by really fast. Everyone always says that, right? And I want to again learn as much as I can, experience as much as I can, and just be present because I'm excited for it. I really am. And it's like, get a little scared, a little nervous, but I think that's very much part of it, and that's okay. So it's just gonna be, I'm just gonna soak it all in. The nerves and scared, fear, and
Yeah.
all of it. So I'm here for it, man. So I think that having that date is helpful. And of course we need to be accurate as we can. Uh, and when we're looking at those dates, because again, if we're looking at that 0.5 to 1% loss per week, what I found, and this is where my own data is very helpful, I always aimed for 2 kilos per month loss. So like 4.54 pounds, right? That for me was always very feasible. It's on the lower end of that range, but it was like I could almost consistently hit that with ease in these past two phases, right? So if I go into that with that anticipation of the 2 kilos per month, I am technically ahead of schedule and can easily make this 30 plus week mark. But as we've seen in this whole journey, things gonna happen. It's gonna come up. Rate of loss will be lower. We might have to adjust. I might get sick. Right, all these things might come in. So having the additional however many plus weeks that are outside, quote unquote, of that estimation of that equation, if you would, is helpful. So it gives me also more confidence going into it because it's like, okay, we're planning for that life stuff. And the quote unquote worst case scenario is I arrive early and I can just eat up into the show, which is kind of the thing now and what we're aiming for most people. And especially we're seeing a lot of 3DMJ people do. And it's just like that would be great. So it's just like a lot of the thinking early on is starting to now pan out. So it makes me feel good about it. It makes Eric feel good about it because we have this plan and it's just like we're working on it together. And it's just, everyone's happy and we have a plan and I feel like I've earned it because of those phases and stuff that I went through, right? So I get everything's just feeling as best as it can at this point, right? And now we just got to go through it. And like I said, because it's the first time, I might be very bad at it. It's possible. And I don't want to say that to be like put me down or whatever, but I think acknowledging that I might get to a point where I'm like, dude, I can't, I cannot be this hungry or I cannot get leaner or whatever it is, or life happens and that's okay. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. But if it has to, hey, it does. You can't avoid that. So it's a lot of mental prep going into this, all prep stuff too. And now it's just about, like I said, executing. So we gonna see.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. To you know what to expect. You're going in with your eyes wide open. You have successful dieting phases under your belt. You this is just a fantastic starting point. Forget cycle or physically, but just psychologically, fantastic starting point. And you're prepared for adjusting the plan if needed as you go through, and maybe you got to push the gas a little bit more. Maybe you have time to back off and take some extra maintenance weeks or whatever. Right? There's all kinds of stuff, but yeah, man, I think it's just you can't ask for a ton more, right? In terms of, which is a testament to you planning this a long way out, and being able to do that and not having to rush. And like you said, if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, like that's not the end of the world, but, and like, you never really know how it's going to feel until you can be as prepared as possible, but until you're there, you don't really know. But still, like you have the plan, you have the knowledge, you have the foresight, you have the support network, You have the accountability also, right, between Eric and me, and like people are going to be looking forward to hearing the updates, and like friends and family that are all like pulling for you and like, yeah, man, this is cool. And
Making me nervous now. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
what I'm saying
it's true.
is you can't fail and let us all down. That's what I'm saying.
Oh no, Jesus, so much on the
We'll
line.
disown you. No, but like that support network is important, right? And that's going to be really nice. And like you have all the stuff, right? So it's really just, as you said, now we go forward and try to execute the plan. But I think also importantly, and it sounds like you're doing this too, you're not psyching yourself out about it too much, right? You're not so much like, okay, this is week 1 of whatever it is, 32.
Yeah.
This is week 1, and I have to lose exactly this much weight, and I have to hit these exact macros, and do like, you're leaving that flexibility in here.
And that's why specifically there I go with 2 kilos per month, because I am notoriously, my scale weight stays the same for like 4 days. And when I went through that first 2024 diet, that was freaking me out. I was looking back at my notes. I'm like, surely tomorrow is going to be a new low. Surely. And I kept saying like chasing the lows in a way.
Yeah.
And I was spending too much time thinking about that. And maybe that starts that cyclical thing of like just feeling like you're being a failure in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So opening up that range and looking at the longer term and understanding averages and trends, that just helped me just think less about it and just look at the numbers. And I only look at that highlighted yellow weekly average now. I don't care what the daily stuff says. I look at that average and then look at the trend across the 2 to 3 weeks, which is another highlighted thing. So bringing the attention to the stuff that really matters and using that to guide my stuff. So opening that up has been really helpful. Going through that has been helpful. So now I know what to expect. So that it's just like, again, going through it, coming with that experience is helpful. So it's like, it feels good. Like I know I'm making it as predictable as I can. And like I said, I'm getting as close as I can now, and like we just leave it up to life.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. I love it, dude. You're in a great position. I'm excited to watch you go through this journey. This is like, this bodybuilding has been such a massively positive thing for me that I'm so excited to see you do it and see what you get out of it. Because I know you want to get the same things out of it that I have always wanted to get out of it too. Like, we're very much in the same wavelength, and I'm excited to see how it all goes. And it'll give us lots of content. We can talk about that as we go.
You were just milking me for content? What?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think one thing too that's really cool that I've noticed that I got to this point is because growing up, like I said, I spent being overweight most of the time, and especially in the past couple of years, I just spent time being heavier. Like now being 81 and a half, dude, it feels so crazy, and I look kind of good. Like objectively, subjectively, whatever you want to feel like, damn, like I've got some muscle, right? Like, and that's cool to feel at this level. So like I'm already proud of that. And that's why, again, it's so important to be okay at different levels and understand it's the long game and all that. So it's been cool because, man, it's nice. It's a cool feeling. So I'm like, that super delayed gratification, like I said, super, because I've been really delaying it, and purposely though, it's paying off already. So like that gets me excited to see, like, as things, as we get a little bit leaner, what them striations be looking like, you know what I mean? What we got, and especially knowing how like I hold fat, like my legs are already coming in quite nice, which is cool, but my upper body's being stubborn, man. So like, but knowing, again, just trust the process. That's how I am. That's normal for me. It's gonna come off at some point, right? We got this time, we got this plan. It's gonna happen. Just let it do it time, and you'll enjoy it when you get there, kind of thing. So that's cool, going through that, and something to look forward to as well for myself and all that. And yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun.
I'm excited, dude. Do you have any, like, I don't know, closing thoughts as you kind of look forward into this next phase of your fitness journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, again, this is how I did it. This is my journey. It's not going to be like this, or does not have to be like this for everyone. Like, you don't have to be cool, 8-year plan, let's go. Like, you could technically be like, yeah, you know what, 2-3 years, or even a year, depending on where you're at with your context, your position, your mindset, all that too. So I don't want to say, hey, y'all, this is the way to do it. Do it like I did, because it might not work well for most of the people. It probably won't, to be honest. And for some people, maybe it would. Or like we talk about, some of this practical stuff that we're highlighting, use that and apply it to your own context, right? So don't do exactly how I did. Just sit on it, think of what that means for you and your stuff, and then go within that. And just, I would just then, again, highlight the idea of giving yourself more time than what you think. Actually thinking about the stuff, having some sort of plan, but being very flexible within that plan, right? So I think it's that intention overall is important and it's helpful, especially specifically for competing in bodybuilding. And then as you get further away from competing in terms of like, I just want to change my physique, you can be more flexible with that too. So again, we're coming in with flexibility, coming in with open mind, with respecting yourself, the game, others, the science, and we're putting it all together. We're blending that science and that art and that fun, and that's cool. So yeah, I think that's just one thing I want to highlight there is it doesn't have to be like me. Again, hey, it might not work for me either. So we're always learning, but really fall in love with that in the process, and I'm looking forward to documenting it too. I've been slowly doing a little bit more of that, and especially now, like once I start prep, I'll do even more so because it feels like more real in that sense. So because as I'm in now, I'm like, do people want to see my physique when I'm super far out? Like it can still be beneficial, but like I think it'll get more quote unquote appealing and useful as we're getting into it. And I have that weekly update where we're actually making some changes. So that's something I'm looking forward to as well because it'll be cool to be documenting that journey and doing so like authentically and having these episodes where we're talking about, yo, I feel terrible. How did you do this, Jake? Right. So
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to, and something I made a post about before is just I did sit with the thoughts of documenting the journey, and it can add some more stress, but I think the benefit that it can provide for other people outweighs that a ton. So I'm very much looking forward to and acknowledging like that's going to be the route we do. So get ready to see me without clothes on the gram is what I'm saying.
I could not be more excited, bro.
But that's probably what I'm very scared of, because if you look through my stuff now, you won't find anything. You might find one stuff actually on like the get to know the training art characters. You see a super far away me side chesting in front of a waterfall. That's it. I was even afraid to put that, but no one commented, so surely don't sell it. But yeah, I think that'll be cool to even document that journey. Like, hey, I'm putting my body on here because it's bodybuilding and I want to talk about it, but I'm not just my body, or this is not just how the physique look. We're going through that journey side of things and navigating all of that, which would be a different arc and exciting for that too. So
I mean, it's kind of disappointing. To me, I think the better plan is just thirst traps to guide clicks and traffic to the training arc.
We're gonna play around with that a little bit, and when I say that, like how we look at playing the algorithm, it's be like putting a picture of me just doing like a side chest. Like you see some highlights, like damn, and like that's my thirst trap. Rather than
I like it.
like he's crazy.
Side chest.
Oh yeah, this is gonna
We
be
need.
that's the best pose, so I'll be practicing that.
It is. It is the best pose.
Yeah, but
awesome, man. Well, I love it, and I love that message at the end too of people listening to this. And it's just like everything else, right? Don't copy numbers, don't copy timeframes, whatever. It's just take the concepts that you very nicely laid out there and apply them to your circumstance, and that'll guide you, you know. And if in doubt, you can always reach out to people who've been doing it longer, and they can help give you some guidance, right? But concepts over everything, right?
absolutely,
that's the thing.
And if last thing is that if people didn't get the analogy that I started with this episode, I said Nintendo Switch has been out for 8 years. And I've been doing this prep technically thing for 8 years. And I only just thought of that now. Just kidding. I knew that this whole time. But that's, damn, just the closure, the circle, the journey on that.
Circular.
I got to call it out. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Nintendo Switch, for the 8 great years. We'll see you in Nintendo Switch 2. And we'll see you in the next episode.